In the quiet hours of a late October evening, a single, seemingly innocuous fragment drifts across a secure channel, an overheard snippet that hints at something far darker. She never came back. If you've ever seen a case like this, leave a trace in the comments. Sometimes, one forgotten memory changes everything. This is the story of a small town in southwestern Ohio, Harrisonville, nestled along the winding banks of the Great Miami River, a place where everyone knows everyone, and secrets tend to hide beneath the surface like submerged debris. It begins with a routine that, on the surface, seemed benign. A grandfather, Michael Lawson, making his weekly pilgrimage to a particular stretch of forest on the outskirts of town, accompanied by his granddaughter, Emily. The ritual was simple but consistent. Every Saturday, just after dawn, Michael would load the old pickup truck with supplies, snacks, a blanket, a pocket knife, and head toward the woods. The forest, a dense grove of ancient oak and maple, had been a part of Harrisonville's landscape for generations. Local lore whispered of strange sounds and quiet figures lurking among the trees, but to the townspeople, it was simply a place of childhood adventures and quiet reflection. But that was only the beginning. Over months, neighbors noticed that Emily, a bright-eyed girl of 11, was increasingly reluctant to talk about those trips. Her mother, Karen Whitmore, a single parent working at the local diner, grew concerned. The visits became less frequent, then stopped altogether. Emily simply vanished from her bed one cold autumn morning, as if swallowed by the woods. Retain your focus. What they found next changed everything. A week after Emily's disappearance, law enforcement officers scoured the forest. What they discovered was a series of strange, almost ritualistic markings carved into the bark of several trees, symbols that bore no immediate meaning but carried an unmistakable weight of secrecy. Nearby, shallow depressions in the earth suggested recent activity, perhaps a makeshift campsite or something more deliberate. The local sheriff's office, led by Sheriff David Carter, a man known for his stoic demeanor and deep sense of justice, initiated a thorough investigation. They interviewed Michael Lawson, who was visibly shaken but cooperative, claiming he had no idea where Emily had gone. He insisted that their trips into the woods were just bonding moments, nothing more. But then, a curious detail surfaced. A small, crumpled letter found lodged under a loose plank in the family's porch. It was addressed to Emily, but the handwriting was unfamiliar. The words cryptic. The forest keeps its secrets. Trust no one. Wait for the sign. No signature, no further clues. And from this moment on, no one was safe. The investigation turned inward, revealing a pattern of similar disappearances over the past decade. Children whose families had once trusted the quiet rituals of the town, only to vanish without trace. The common thread was subtle. Each child had been last seen on a Saturday morning, heading into the woods with a family member or a trusted neighbor. The locals whispered of an unspoken rule, a code of silence that had protected the truth for years. What they found next, however, was truly disturbing. An anonymous tip led investigators to a rundown motel on the edge of Harrisonville, near the old Route 66. Inside one of the rooms, they uncovered a series of photographs, images of children, including Emily, captured in moments that suggested they had been watched. Some images showed them playing in the woods, others with their eyes deliberately obscured. Alongside these photographs were pages torn from small notebooks, notes filled with coded phrases, references to the plan, and a recurring phrase, the guardian's duty. But there was one detail no one talked about, a pattern of what appeared to be shadow transfers, a term the investigators later used to describe the mysterious movement of children between locations, raised questions about how these children disappeared so completely. They seemed to vanish into thin air, as if a silent agreement had been made, as if someone was orchestrating a clandestine operation. The town's small police force, overwhelmed by what they'd uncovered, reached out for federal assistance. But the deeper they delved, the more elusive the truth became. The local sheriff's office was told to back off, and the investigation was quietly handed over to an internal task force known only by its code name, Operation Silent Grove. Would you have trusted them? The families of the missing children clung to hope, but also to fear. The whispers grew louder about private arrangements, discreet meetings, and something called the Order. Some claimed that Michael Lawson had ties to a shadow network operating within the town, a web of influence that kept the secret buried. From this moment on, no one was safe. What was the purpose of these clandestine gatherings? Why were children targeted? The official story suggested a predator, a sick individual exploiting the town's innocence. But the truth was far more complex. The evidence hinted at a covert operation, an internal hierarchy that used the woods as a meeting point, a sanctuary for rituals that blended local folklore with something darker. The symbols carved into the trees were more than mere graffiti. They resembled ancient sigils, perhaps borrowed from long-forgotten traditions, twisted into something perverse. And this is where things get strange. Among the files recovered from the motel, investigators found a series of coded messages, almost like a secret language, that referenced the Guardians, the Harvest, and the Chosen. In one message, the phrase, "the seed must be planted," was repeated. It suggested that the children's disappearances were not random, but part of an ongoing plan, a long-term scheme with roots deeper than anyone imagined. What if Emily's case was just one piece of a larger puzzle? The last witnesses were a local couple, Sarah and Tom Jenkins, who claimed to have seen Emily in the woods weeks before her disappearance. Their testimony was inconsistent, and they seemed nervous when questioned. A child's drawing was discovered in their home, pinned to the fridge. A simple sketch of a tree with strange symbols around it, and a figure beneath, holding a child's hand. But someone knew far more than they admitted. In the weeks that followed, a series of arrests were made. Several individuals associated with the town's shadow network were detained, some for unrelated charges, others quietly released after cooperation. The investigation revealed that certain local officials, including the town's mayor, had long-standing ties to clandestine groups that operated under the guise of community service, but in truth, engaged in clandestine exchanges. And then, a leak. An internal memo surfaced. An internal document from the FBI's files on Operation Silent Grove that hinted at a disturbing pattern, a recurring cycle of abductions, ritualistic symbols, and a hierarchy that spanned beyond Harrisonville itself. The memo contained references to the Central Node, a place where all the threads converged, possibly a location outside the town. The case seemed to unravel at every turn, yet the most unsettling question remained. What happened to Emily? She was last seen alive, according to official reports, in the woods. But witnesses who claimed to have seen her after that date reported only seeing her face in a photograph, posted anonymously on a dark web forum, with a cryptic message, "The Guardian watches still." Only years later did its meaning become clear. The final piece of the puzzle was an old, creased letter found hidden behind a loose brick in the basement of Michael Lawson's home. It was written by Emily herself, or perhaps by someone claiming to be her. The handwriting was shaky, the language fragmented, but the message was unmistakable. They took me, but I'm still here, waiting for the day I can tell the truth. What would you have done then? Would you have believed that the woods held a secret larger than anyone dared imagine? Or would you dismiss it as the ramblings of a child lost in fear? This story, like many others buried beneath the surface of small-town life, leaves us with more questions than answers. The lines between innocence and complicity blur in the shadows, the symbols, the disappearances, the whispers. They all suggest a network far more complex than a single predator. You've heard it now. You can't unhear it. What would you have done? Would you have trusted the authorities? Or would you have looked deeper into the darkness that lurks beneath the calm surface of what we call home? Subscribe before this one disappears. The deeper investigation into Harrisonville's dark corners revealed a disturbing pattern of complicity that extended beyond isolated individuals. It became clear that the entire community, in some way, had been affected, either by fear, silence, or the influence of unseen forces. The town's quiet reputation was a facade carefully maintained, concealing a web of secret arrangements that had persisted for decades. One of the most revealing discoveries was an old ledger, found buried in the attic of the town's abandoned textile mill, where records of shadow transfers encoded. Entries detailed the movement of children through a series of clandestine routes. These routes led to undisclosed locations, some outside the state, others into underground facilities long believed to be defunct. The ledger's entries referenced the Central Node, a term that suggested a nexus point of operation, possibly a hidden compound or a remote site used for rituals, or perhaps worse. Retain your focus. The evidence pointed toward a highly organized operation, one that used the forest and the surrounding infrastructure as part of a larger, covert network. As investigators traced these routes, they uncovered a pattern of private meetings held in nondescript locations: an abandoned barn, a vacant motel room, the parking lot of the old Harrisonville diner. These meetings were often masked as charity fundraisers or community volunteer events, but their true purpose was shrouded in secrecy. The community's trust was exploited, and many of its most influential members, business owners, local officials, even law enforcement, were linked to these clandestine gatherings, either directly or through shadowy intermediaries. The implication was chilling. The entire operation depended on the complicity of those sworn to uphold the law and serve the community. And this is where things get strange. In the depths of the FBI's files, a photograph surfaced, an aerial shot of the Harrisonville forest, taken from a drone. There, amidst the treetops, was what appeared to be a deliberately concealed structure, a camouflaged complex partially hidden by foliage. The structure bore signs of recent activity: faint lights, movement, and the unmistakable outline of a large central chamber. This was not a coincidence. What if the forest was not just a meeting place, but the core of the operation? A hidden location where rituals, transfers, and perhaps even sacrifices took place, something that defied the normal understanding of human activity in a small town. The FBI's analysis of the footage suggested that the structure had been used repeatedly over the years. Its purpose remained unclear, but the pattern of activity strongly indicated an organized effort to control the disappearances. Meanwhile, whispers of a custodian or guardian persisted, an elusive figure believed to oversee the operation. Witnesses spoke of a tall, shadowy individual seen in fleeting glimpses, always present near the ritual sites, always watching. Some claim to have seen this figure in photographs, their face blurred or obscured by darkness. The community's folklore had long spoken of a protector of the woods, a figure both revered and feared. But someone knew far more than they admitted. A name kept cropping up in the investigation: Eleanor Bishop, a retired teacher who had lived in Harrisonville for over 50 years. She was known for her quiet demeanor and her passion for local history, but her recent death, shortly after the investigation intensified, raised questions. An autopsy report was inconclusive, but her home was searched, revealing a hidden room filled with journals, diaries that detailed her own involvement in the town's secret history. Her writings referenced the Order, describing it as an ancient tradition passed down through generations, one that required the safeguarding of the seed, a phrase that recurred in her entries. She spoke of the guardian, the harvest, and the renewal, suggesting a ritualistic purpose behind the disappearances. The last pages of her journal contained a disturbing confession. I was part of it. I saw things no child should see. The forest holds the key, but the key is in the bloodline. Would you have trusted her? Or seen her as another victim of the town's dark legacy? From that day, the city was never the same. In the aftermath, several arrests were made, some of them high profile, others quietly dismissed. The revelations caused a ripple of shock, denial, and outright silence. The town's leaders issued statements about isolated incidents, but the truth was far more insidious. Among those detained was a man named Jonathan Hayes, a prominent businessman with ties to local government. His name appeared repeatedly in the coded documents as the broker, a facilitator who managed the logistics of the operation. Witnesses claimed he had a commanding presence, and some reported seeing him in the woods during the ritual times. And then, a new piece of evidence emerged. A clandestine recording leaked from an anonymous source. It captured a conversation between Hayes and an unidentified individual discussing the next harvest and the need to keep the guardian satisfied. The recording was distorted, but enough clarity remained to suggest a hierarchy that extended beyond Harrisonville, perhaps into a broader network across several states. The last, most unsettling clue was a map found in the possession of a now-deceased informant that marked out multiple sites, all connected by a web of underground tunnels and hidden pathways. These sites included old abandoned mines, underground utility corridors, and remote farmhouses. Each location appeared to be a node in a vast secret infrastructure designed to facilitate the operation. And then, something happened no one could have predicted. A witness, a former participant who had broken free from the operation, came forward with a startling confession. They claimed that Emily's disappearance was not merely a tragic accident but part of a final act in the ritual, an event that would determine the future of the secret network. They hinted that Emily might still be alive, hidden somewhere, perhaps under the control of those who believed they were doing the good work. But the most troubling revelation was a series of photographs obtained from a clandestine source showing a young girl, possibly Emily, wearing a strange symbol painted on her forehead, her eyes vacant, but her mouth slightly open as if in silent plea. That call changed everything. Investigators now believe that Emily's fate was intertwined with the very core of the operation, possibly a sacrifice, or a safeguard, or something even more disturbing. The truth was veiled behind layers of secrecy, lies, and fear. What would you have done then? Would you have believed that the woods held a secret larger than any known ritual? Or would you have dismissed it as the paranoid imaginings of a small-town girl? You've heard it now. You can't unhear it. What would you have done? Would you have trusted the authorities or looked into the darkness yourself? Would you have uncovered the truth, risking everything? Or would you have turned away, convinced it was just a local legend? Subscribe before this one disappears. The investigation's scope widened as whispers of a clandestine network spread beyond Harrisonville's borders. The hidden routes, the symbols, the ritual sites, all pointed to an operation that had persisted for generations, cloaked in secrecy. Yet, as the evidence piled up, so did the questions. Who was truly pulling the strings? And what was the ultimate purpose behind the orchestrated disappearances? In the months that followed, a series of clandestine raids targeted suspected locations, abandoned farms, underground utility tunnels, and old train yards, each revealing more fragments of an unseen infrastructure. Some sites yielded nothing but remnants of old rituals and faded symbols. Others uncovered disturbing artifacts, small talismans, ritual knives, and photographs of children, sometimes with cryptic annotations scrawled in hurried handwriting. One particularly revealing find was a hidden room beneath the remains of the Harrisonville textile mill, a place long thought to be defunct. Inside, investigators uncovered a collection of journals, decades old, meticulously kept, detailing the rituals and the hierarchy. The handwriting was identical to the notes found in Eleanor Bishop's diaries, suggesting a long-standing tradition rooted deep within the town's history. But that was only the beginning. Within those pages, a recurring name emerged: Victor Crane, a man who had been a prominent figure in Harrisonville's history. His name appeared repeatedly in connection with early secret gatherings, supposedly a founder of the order that governed the operation. The journals described him as the first guardian, tasked with overseeing the seed, a phrase that appeared with increasing frequency throughout the texts. What if Victor Crane's influence persisted long after his death? What if, in some form, his presence still lurked behind the scenes? The question hung heavily over the investigation. Meanwhile, the community's fabric was unraveling. Rumors swirled that certain families had been involved for generations, passing down knowledge, rituals, and silent complicity. The town's oldest residents, once silent and stoic, grew more guarded. Children's drawings, once dismissed as innocent, began to carry new, disturbing symbols. Old photographs showed familiar faces with subtle alterations, hidden symbols, or unfamiliar figures lurking in the background. But someone knew far more than they said. A retired FBI agent, James Holloway, took a particular interest. He had been part of the initial task force, but had mysteriously been removed from the case when the investigation threatened to expose too much. Holloway's relentless pursuit of the truth led him to an obscure, long-forgotten archive, an old county records office where he uncovered a faded, leather-bound ledger kept by Harrisonville's original town founder. The ledger contained a cryptic entry: "The seed is planted in the bloodline. The guardian's duty is eternal. The harvest will come when the time is right." The language echoed the notes found in Eleanor Bishop's journals, suggesting a continuous, unbroken tradition. The entries hinted at a cycle, each generation responsible for maintaining the secret, each guardian bound by oath. And then there was the final, most unsettling discovery: an audio recording from a long-band radio broadcast unearthed in a forgotten file cabinet. The recording captured a voice, calm yet commanding, speaking in code. Children are the future, the roots of the tree. When the guardian calls, they must listen. The harvest begins anew when the sign appears. The bloodline flows through time, unbroken. The voice was eerily familiar. It sounded like a voice long silenced, possibly Victor Crane's, or someone claiming his authority. What if the entire operation was a form of twisted inheritance? A shadow legacy passed down through bloodlines, each guardian ensuring the continuation of a ritual that spanned generations. And then, something happened no one could have predicted. A young woman named Sarah Jenkins, a descendant of the family that once claimed to have seen Emily in the woods, came forward. She held a small, worn pendant, an heirloom she said was passed down through her family. It was inscribed with the same symbols found carved into the trees and painted on children's foreheads in photographs. Sarah's story was chilling. Her great-grandfather had spoken of the guardian and the seed, warning her that the town's true legacy was rooted in something far older and darker than anyone suspected. Her revelation sparked a new wave of fear. Could Emily still be alive? Had her disappearance been part of a larger, ongoing cycle? Or was she already lost, sacrificed to some unseen force that demanded obedience? The last, most compelling clue was a map, discovered in a hidden compartment of Eleanor Bishop's house. It marked several sites across Ohio, Kentucky, and West Virginia, all connected by underground tunnels and clandestine pathways. These sites included abandoned mines, old utility corridors, and remote farms, each one a node in an intricate network designed to sustain the operation. And then, the final twist. An informant who had been secretly cooperating with authorities revealed that the true, central node was not a physical location but a concept, an idea, a belief system that had been embedded in the town's culture. The symbols, the rituals, the secrecy, they all served to reinforce the control of the guardians who believed they were custodians of an ancient power. They thought they knew the truth. They were wrong, because there was one piece of evidence that refused to be ignored: a fragment of a diary found in a sealed box beneath the floorboards of Michael Lawson's basement. Its pages were stained and torn, but one entry stood out. The seed has sprouted. The guardian's watch is unbroken. The harvest is near. Emily is waiting. Beneath the roots, in the place where the past and the future entwine. Would you have trusted that Emily was truly gone, or believed she was still somewhere beneath the earth, held in a silent prison, part of a centuries-old cycle that refused to die? This story is not finished. The truth remains hidden behind layers of lies, symbols, and silence. The town's dark legacy continues, an inheritance passed down through blood and shadow, waiting for the next generation to awaken what was buried long ago. You've heard it now. You can't unhear it. What would you have done? Would you have looked deeper into the roots of Harrisonville's secrets? Or would you have turned away, convinced that some stories are better left untold? Subscribe before this one disappears into the silence.